Hi, my name is Mackenzie, and fun fact about me, I think everyone has the right to free speech, except Tim Ballard. But that would deprive him of his second favorite pastime, which is making shit up. His first favorite being picking out really terrible fake tattoos.
Being a slave stealer is more than just rescuing kids. That's the most important thing for sure. But it's stealing the slavery out of our hearts, too. And we all need to get on board here. We need to be slave stealers, all of us.
And if everybody did that, we wouldn't have this leftist, godless, woke stuff that's hurting kids.
It's true.
You would just be focusing on yourself.
Right.
Wokeness is selfishness.
So true.
Right? And anything else, you know, the Judeo-Christian values that built this country is about others.
Evil pedophiles, traffickers will stop at nothing. And they have allies. Allies in government, in the media, in big corporations, and even in public institutions. They continue to lie about me and attempt to destroy my good name. And they will never stop. I want everyone to know that I and our vast army of supporters will likewise never stop. I am a faithful member in good standing in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I believe in Jesus Christ, the Holy Scriptures, and I believe in our faith with all of my heart. The LDS Church does not engage in political activity.
Yeah, well, I've been accused, first of all, of everything, like anything, you name it. I've been accused of being a trafficker, swindler. I mean, everything you can think of. So, and she always told me this one's coming. And I said, nah, this one wouldn't come,
If you've never heard of this man, let me introduce you. He has visions that dead Native American prophets are speaking to him. He believes he is akin to Jesus Christ himself, and he manipulates women into sleeping with him because God told him it was okay. I am obviously talking about Joseph Smith. The parallels between Tim and Joseph have been discussed ever since this news first broke of the most recent allegations against Tim Ballard. And after reading through court documents, it is so scary and so obvious that Mormonism literally fried this man's brain. If you watched my last video, I talked about how Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt all got their extreme beliefs directly from Mormonism. And it is very apparent this is the case with Tim Ballard. These people did not take Mormon doctrine and make it worse. They simply took it at face value. So when prophets and leaders in the scriptures teach harmful ideas, you can't be shocked when members use those harmful ideas to harm people. Franke, Hildebrandt, and Ballard are not bad eggs. They are the exact kind of eggs you get when you follow the recipe. So before you start typing, most Mormons aren't like this, what you really mean is, most Mormons aren't taking their religion seriously. Ye shall know them by their fruits, and you can't exclude the shitty ones just because they make the other fruits look bad. Isn't it Mormons that love the poop in the brownie metaphor? If there's a little bit of poop in the brownie, it makes the whole brownie bad. Except it doesn't apply to the church though, and they will pretend all day like they aren't the ones who shit in those brownies. Sorry for the gross analogy, but damn it, if there's anything still Mormon about me, it's that I love a good analogy. Tim Ballard has been a Mormon celebrity for a while now, but I only first heard of him this summer when Sound of Freedom came out, which I did do a video on. What I knew at that point was Tim Ballard is a liar, he is a scammer, and he is a piece of shit. What I know now is Tim Ballard is a liar, he is a scammer, and he is a piece of shit. I'm not saying I saw this specific news coming. I'm saying he's always been like this, but more of his victims are finally speaking up, and it will be satisfying to watch his downfall. But whenever I talk about anyone being a bad person, predators usually for some reason, apologists love to bring up their family. What about the family? You're hurting his innocent family. No, Tim hurt his family. And I hope and pray to Taylor Swift that his wife leaves his ass. But unfortunately, as we see with cult leaders, they can be charming as hell, to some people at least. And Tim Ballard has got his wife wrapped around his finger, so I am not holding my breath. And so far, she is standing by her husband. And Catherine Ballard seems like a very sweet person who doesn't deserve any of this. And that is his fault. So I will continue to rake him over the coals. Thank you very much. Speaking of his wife, I want you to watch this clip of a recent interview that they did together when the news first broke of these allegations.
We talked about an operation, how we protect ourselves by having female partners. And, we've rescued hundreds of kids doing that.
I don't like hearing about the work about what he has to do to rescue children, but he's rescuing children. And I know that he has done it in a way of complete faithfulness to me. They knew what they were doing because there was training. And not everybody made it through training. There were a couple times when Tim was propositioned during a training like, hey, here's my hotel card. And Tim would call his assistants and say, they're out.
That is a grip she's got there. She is holding on to him for dear life. And as you heard, she is just repeating back what he has been parroting to her, which is that if anyone was inappropriate, it was the other women. They were coming on to him. They are giant slut bags, not him. All of the information she has is secondhand because she admittedly does not want to know what Tim is doing on these missions. She's not comfortable hearing the nitty-gritty details of all of it, which I totally understand. But that leaves him so much room to bullshit her, which he does constantly. Tim's own friends, who also suck, including Eric Mustos and Glenn Beck, do not believe him. People are abandoning ship for good reason. And there are still some people who don't believe any of it. The only reason that the LDS Church was able to get slightly ahead of this news and disavow him was because Vice News approached them for comment with all of their evidence, which the journalists admit they did months before, and the church did not want to be held liable. That's it. It has nothing to do with the church calling out immorality, and it has everything to do with the church just not wanting to go to court and desperately trying to maintain their squeaky clean image, which in my opinion is a losing battle. The Mormon Church's own members are turning on them. And after the announcement was made about Tim Ballard, they decided the church is corrupt, which I agree, but for different reasons.
Mr. Tim Ballard, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, such as we also are members, is being criticized by the church for whatever supposed bad behavior. We have felt that there's a need for people like us who are faithful members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who have been suspecting for a very long time now that most, or all of the leadership of this church is corrupt, and not just corrupt, but evil. And we mean evil.
Cults literally mindfuck you, and suddenly everything is a conspiracy. Mormons are used to hearing this type of language and are now weaponizing it against the very church that taught them to speak this way. These are the same people who called anyone who did not like the Sound of Freedom movie schmetophiles. And the only reason that anyone would accuse Tim Ballard of doing these things is because they are a schmetophile. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Tim Ballard may have done some good things in his life. We're not 100% sure on that because Sound of Freedom was almost entirely made up, but let's pretend he did some good things. It does not exonerate him from doing atrocious things. They don't cancel each other out. That's not how the justice system works. One theory I have that is entirely speculation is that Tim has PTSD from his field of work, and consequently his behavior is the result of not going to an actual trauma specialized therapist and instead chatting it up with his hallucination of Nephi. Another theory is that Tim is just an asshole. Sometimes people are just born assholes. The first lawsuit starts with the quote, "One of the saddest lessons of history is this. If we've been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you give a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back." That is powerful. I have goosebumps and I need that framed. If that doesn't perfectly describe to me why people do not leave the LDS Church or why people do not believe these Tim Ballard allegations, I don't know what does. No one likes admitting that they've been duped. It feels like admitting you are stupid. And if I haven't been clear, I don't think everyone who has been manipulated or abused is stupid. Mormons are very intelligent people, and these women filing this lawsuit are very intelligent women. It sucks to admit that you've been tricked and lied to, especially when you find out it's the same organization or person that you have defended to other people. And then you have all this guilt and anger, but instead of going through all of that, you can just remain in denial. Another reason victims don't speak up is because they are attacked and not believed no matter how much evidence they have. And a lawsuit of this magnitude has a lot of evidence attached to it. But despite all of that, there are people who just do not want to believe that they have been deceived. Because it's a shitty feeling. You feel like you have the word loser tattooed on your forehead. And this is why the Me Too movement is so important. As victims, we have strength in numbers. And when one person speaks up, another victim sees that and has the courage to speak up themselves. And then another person speaks up, and another person, and it keeps the ball rolling. In fact, not only are there 2 lawsuits and 7 plaintiffs suing Tim Ballard and OUR, attorney Suzette Rasmussen said she anticipates more lawsuits in the future, due in large part to individuals who have contacted us. There are more, guys. There are a lot more. So let's get into everything we know so far. These are all allegations. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty, including the victims. I'm going to make it clear what my opinion is, but I am not stating my opinions as fact. I don't know why I'm acting like Tim is ever going to see this. I think he's a little busy at the moment. The defendants of this lawsuit are not just Tim Ballard and OUR, but Tim's many other companies. The Spear Fund, the Rockwell Group, Liberty and Light, Slave Stealers, Children Need Families, and Deacon Inc. That is 7 different companies. The lawsuit states that defendant Ballard is the alter ego and the face of all the said corporate and company entities that will be collectively referred to as OUR, as Ballard wore many hats with said companies and no distinction between the companies was made. My question for Tim is, why do you need 7 different businesses that all do the same exact thing? My guess is to move money around, but I would love to hear another explanation. Tim, if you're watching, please drop your answer in the comments below. Here's what I could dig up on these companies. Slave Stealers is the name of a book Tim wrote in 2018, and I can't find any other info other than their business license is still active. The Rockwell Group was a for-profit business that all I could find was an expired business license. Same for Deacon Inc. They have an expired license, as well as Children Need Families, and the Children Need Families Foundation was actually an OUR-owned nonprofit run by his wife Catherine, as she was passionate about helping orphaned children who had been rescued by Tim, and she wanted to help them find families to adopt them. It seems like Catherine has decided to close those doors as well because of all these lawsuits, which I think is smart. So the businesses that are still active are the Spear Fund, Liberty and Light, and OUR. And I could not tell you the difference between them. The lawsuit claims that the other corporate defendants were created by Ballard in order to funnel the donations coming into OUR into corporate profits and shareholder distributions. Yeah, sketchy finances has been an issue for Tim Ballard for a while now. It's something I spoke briefly about in my previous video. Remember his giant creepy whiteboard that had all the arrows pointing to timballard.com? And it's practically like a confession to money laundering. He doesn't even try to hide it. It's really embarrassing. But like I talked about with Jody Hildebrandt establishing her company Connections as a nonprofit, Ballard also learned the same tactic from the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church has so many businesses, it's hard to keep track of them all, and they are all from tithing donations. They say it's not tithing donations because it's actually the interest earned on someone's tithing. So it's no longer tithing. Mormon math. Hey mom, I'm ready to take out my trust fund. Okay, here is the $1,000 that we originally put in the trust fund. What? You said there was $10,000 in it. Yes, but that's the money we earned off of interest. But it was my money that got you that money. No, you gave it to me willingly, remember? Yes, but I didn't know that you were going to then make money off of it. Well, that's not my fault. It's not your fault that I trusted you? Correct. Let's see how the lawsuit claims that Ballard got away with this. While promotional and media materials made the ops appear to be paramilitary drop-ins to arrest traffickers and rescue children, what most ops consisted of was going to strip clubs and massage parlors across the world after flying first class to get there and staying at 5-star hotels, on boats, and at VRBOs across the globe. These ops were a fundraising machine, though they were more show than substance, and the entire OUR enterprises were funded by donors for these ops, many of whom held bake sales and literally donated their widow's mite to OUR and Tim Ballard. So OUR has been operating for 10 years now, and throughout those years they have been holding fundraiser event after event after event, all under the guise of helping trafficked children, which is wonderful. Anyone with a heart would give their money to that cause. Except that's not where all, or at least a good chunk of the money was going. OUR reported to the IRS $6.9 million in revenue in 2016, $22.3 million in 2019, $45 million in 2020, $52.93 million in 2021, and $56 million in 2022. In the IRS 9090 form, it is reported that Tim Ballard received a salary of $525,958 in 2022, yet former employees claim that Ballard earned over $14 million through his for-profit companies, some of which was funneled from the non-profit entity. OUR was making staggering profits as Ballard opened for-profit companies, defendants which were alter egos of OUR, and that allowed Ballard to line his pockets with the widow's mite. $14 million. That makes me sick. You had kids baking cookies so that Tim could get a rub down from an escort, allegedly. And why does anyone running a charity think they alone deserve all that money? Because that's what Ballard thinks. He thinks this is the reward he gets for being a good person, because the Mormon religion is a prosperity gospel. The more righteous you are, the more you'll be blessed financially. But at that point, even if he wasn't spending the money on hookers and blow, he is no longer in it for the children. He is taking advantage of people who actually want to make a difference in the world, and he's using it to help himself. One of Ballard's closest friends is Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes, and Reyes was promoting Ballard until just recently to be the next United States Senator from the state of Utah. General Reyes has repeatedly vouched for OUR and Tim Ballard, even participating in an alleged op in Colombia, which was well publicized in Utah, giving Ballard the cover of the top law enforcement officer in the state of Utah to carry out his purposes, including the couple's ruse, even while consumer complaints and criminal investigations were pouring into his office regarding the improprieties of OUR and Ballard. So allegedly, the reason that Ballard and OUR were able to stay out of legal trouble for this long was because he was buddy-buddy with the Attorney General. Unfreaking believable. Now this would be a good movie, except I want every penny of that movie to be given back to the donors who were duped by Ballard. And it just keeps getting worse. Let's get into his relationship with the apostle of the LDS Church, Russell Ballard. President Ballard has cited Ballard to students at Brigham Young University, Idaho, as an expert of Book of Mormon prophet Nephi and the Mormon view of American history. Tim Ballard has met with President Ballard in the church administration building in Salt Lake City to discuss OUR's work. Ballard has authored at least 3 purported historical books promoting Mormon nationalism that have been published and sold by the Mormon church-owned Deseret Book, which were big sellers in the Mormon community and further created the myth of Tim Ballard. I mentioned these books that Tim has written in my previous video where he claims that the Book of Mormon is responsible for Abraham Lincoln emancipating the slaves. And now we know why he thought that, because Nephi himself was telling him that was true. When the Mormon church denounced Tim Ballard, they said, quote, "The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints never endorsed, supported, or represented OUR, Tim Ballard, or any projects associated with him." It's not even disappointing at this point that they are flat out lying. It's just predictable and annoying. Like, his books were sold at the church's bookstore, Deseret Book, and they had an article on LDS.org promoting Tim Ballard and OUR, which I personally got screenshots of before they deleted it. I saw it with my own eyes. And the two Ballards did have a close-knit relationship. Fact, fact, fact. But with the church, up is down and down is up, and that never really happened, and poof, your memory is gone. Why is it so hard to say, yes, we did support him, until we learned all of this new information about him and now we no longer do? It's because that would be admitting to a mistake. And the church doesn't make mistakes, silly. When they were caught by the SEC and fined $5 million, they said, mistakes were made. Mistakes were made by who? Come on, mistakes were made by who? I know you can do it! Tim Ballard felt very supported and encouraged by the LDS Church and by Russell Ballard to continue his work. But like we saw with Jody Hildebrandt, they will use you and then they will drop you the second you turn into a liability for them. And I don't like Tim, but that's gotta sting. In a video taken immediately after the church's statement, he genuinely looks flabbergasted.
Everybody believes that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that I've defended for how many years, I've written how many books, made how much money for Deseret Book, and nobody can tell me. Guess what? Do you think I called my stake president? I said, "Do you know about this?" No idea. I don't believe the church did this. I truly don't.
Me either.
My stake president had no idea.
No.
Is that possible?
He genuinely seems shocked and betrayed, and I think he should feel betrayed. I don't feel bad for him, but the church absolutely did him dirty by pretending they never had anything to do with him. That's just mean. And now it's rumored that he's been excommunicated, which if you've never been Mormon is a really big deal and is a rarity saved only for those who critique the church, and sometimes, but not always, for people who commit crimes. In order to find and save trafficked children, Ballard would receive psychic information from psychic defendant Janet Russin about where the ops should occur, along with reassurance and justification of everything Ballard did, while predicting the future situations the operatives would be in so that they could plan the next op. Miss Russin claims that she spoke to a dead prophet named Nephi who directed her about where to locate the trafficked children. Additionally, Ballard would get ketamine treatments and have a scribe come in with him while he would talk to the dead prophet Nephi and issue forth prophecies about Ballard's greatness and future as a United States Senator, President of the United States, and ultimately the Mormon prophet, to usher in the second coming of Jesus Christ. Not only was his psychic Janet speaking to the prophet Nephi from the Book of Mormon, Tim Ballard himself was speaking to Nephi, who told him he was destined for all of these things. I want to make something clear. If he has a mental illness, which I do not know that he does or doesn't have, I'm not making fun of that. Mental illness is not taken seriously enough, especially in the church. And the special K treatment that Tim Ballard got, I've done that. I did it through a company called Mind Bloom, and it was extremely helpful for me for my depression. For me, it was a really cool meditative experience, and I did not have any hallucinations, but I was very aware that could happen and does happen to people. And some people believe that psychedelics are actually a gateway to the other side, and not just medically induced hallucinations. However, that is not an LDS belief, as the church is very anti-drug, and if he was speaking to a Mormon prophet through those means, it doesn't seem like that lines up with the doctrine. However, Tim Ballard used the Mormon loophole. Ballard would also claim that a passage from the Book of Mormon in which a man kills another man on the promptings of the Holy Spirit demonstrates that sometimes the Holy Spirit asks people to perform unconventional tasks. This is referring to the story in the Book of Mormon where Nephi cuts off a drunk man's head because God told him to. Yes, just like the Bible, the Book of Mormon is extremely violent. And Mormon doctrine can be summarized by this. God gives us commandments that we are always to obey, unless he gives us permission not to obey them. Except the only people this tends to apply to is leadership in the church, including prophets, apostles, stake presidents, bishops, basically men. And I think members are finally figuring out how unfair and confusing that is. Why is a prophet allowed to unalive someone just because God told them to? But if a member of the church unalives someone and says God told them to do it, they are condemned and called crazy and thrown in jail. Tim saw this loophole and ran with it. He was like, okay, prophets are allowed to break commandments, therefore I must be a future prophet, because I feel like God is telling me to break a lot of commandments right now. It's the same thought process that Joseph Smith had when he tried to convince 19-year-old Nancy Rigdon to be one of his polygamist wives. In what's now called the Happiness Letter, Joseph Smith wrote to Nancy, quote, "That which is wrong under one circumstance may be and often is right under another. God said, 'Thou shalt not kill.' At another time he said, 'Thou shalt utterly destroy.' This is the principle on which the government of heaven is conducted, by revelation adapted to the circumstances in which the children of the kingdom are placed. Whatever God requires is right, no matter what it is, although we may not see the reason thereof till long after the events transpire." Joseph taught that God is right no matter what. So if you claim you are speaking to God, either by being a prophet or receiving personal revelation from God, that's where the gray area comes in. Even though the Mormon Church does teach a lot of black and white doctrine, there are always exceptions to those rules, and those exceptions are almost always priesthood-holding men. Joseph Smith thought he was the exception. Tim Ballard thought he was the exception. And although they weren't men, Jody Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke believed they were the exception. They were the exception to the exception because they weren't in leadership in the church. So honestly, glass ceiling breakers. Way to go, ladies. That was a joke. They are terrible people. But they all did it using Joseph Smith's teachings, which is God sometimes tells us to do bad things, and we don't know why. Therefore, the bad things are sometimes good things. God, I am so happy I'm not in a cult anymore. So now that we know Tim's thought process, that he can do whatever the fuck he wants to because he's a future prophet, let's look at the SA allegations. Ballard began to claim that President M. Russell Ballard had given Ballard permission to do the couple's ruse as long as there was no sexual intercourse or kissing on the lips, and had given him a special priesthood blessing as such. Ballard would also claim to the women that defendant Janet Russin told him that he had been married to them in a previous life, and so their conduct was appropriate. Ballard would also claim to his female ruse partners that if his wife Catherine were to die, he would immediately marry them. Ballard told one of his victims that when his wife would question what Ballard was doing with these women, Ballard would tell his wife that his female partners kept falling in love with him and wanted to kill Catherine so that they could be together. Listen, my true crime girlies, I don't consume as nearly as much true crime content as I used to, but I've consumed a lot of it. And I'm just gonna say what we're all thinking. This sounds like a man who is preparing to unalive his wife. That is pure speculation. I have no evidence of this, but tell me this doesn't sound like the shit guys say to their mistresses right before his wife mysteriously disappears. Tell me it doesn't sound like that. I'm not saying Catherine is in danger, but in my opinion, Tim Ballard is unhinged, and the amount of times he talked about Catherine not being alive anymore is alarming to me. I'm not accusing him of anything. But since Catherine admitted that she doesn't want to know what Tim does on his operations, she's getting bits and pieces from him. And those bits and pieces are, oh my gosh, these women keep falling in love with me. So if you get any texts or calls, just ignore them, babe. Those bitches are crazy. Wow, what a unique and never heard before defense. Except we hear it from men all the time, including Joseph Smith. In the book Mormon Polygamy, A History, written by Richard Van Wagner, he quotes Joseph Jackson, who said, "When, as happens in the case of Miss Martha Brotherton and Miss Nancy Rigdon, Joseph Smith's overtures were rejected, with disdain and exposure, he threatened he would set 100 hellhounds on them to destroy their reputations." That is a pattern that occurs beyond just this example. Anytime Joseph Smith is attacked, he flips those accusations against the accuser. When Joseph Smith pulled Nancy Rigdon in a room and locked the door, he told her the Lord had given her to him to be his wife. And she was like, no, let me the fuck out now. That pissed him off. You do not tell the prophet of God no. So she tells her dad what happened. And Joseph Smith talks to him, and he initially denies it. He even denies writing the happiness letter, which we now know to this day was written by him. And he starts spreading rumors that Nancy Rigdon is a whore, and he only wanted to talk to her to call her to repentance. That's the only reason he had Nancy Hyde, one of his secret polygamist wives, invite Nancy Rigdon to a secret meeting that his wife Emma didn't know about. The girl's just a fucking whore. It's the oldest, most tired, exhausted trick in the misogynist handbook. It's under the chapter Not Handling Rejection Well. I didn't harass her, she harassed me. I did a full video on Joseph Smith's polygamy if you're interested, but yeah, he just denied. Joseph Smith said, quote, "I had not been married scarcely 5 minutes and made a proclamation of the gospel before it was reported that I had 7 wives. I am innocent of all these charges, and you can bear witness of my innocence, for you know me yourselves. What a thing it is for a man to be accused of committing adultery and having 7 wives when I can only find 1. You guys know me? It's Joe. Good old Joe. I would never. Come on, guys, it's me, Tim. I help kids. I wouldn't do that. Y'all know me. We don't know you, Tim. And now the church is saying they never knew you. Ouch." Ballard would insist that the women stay silent about their alleged sexual encounters with him because if they told anyone, it would put everyone's lives at risk on the ops mission. It was necessary to save the trafficked children, and because he was blessed by President Ballard to be a future president of the United States and then the prophet of the Mormon Church. So Tim used God as a weapon, which Joseph did as well. Joseph even said that an angel with a flaming sword was forcing him to marry underage girls, and that angel has really fucked up priorities. After the women were coerced into engaging in sexual activity with Ballard, he used their encounters to his advantage, sending texts to some of the women that would say something to the effect of, "We will have so much shit on each other, we will be deterred into silence on all things forever." You know what I'm about to say. Yes, Joseph Smith said the same thing. I told you, the comparisons are frightening. Joseph said, quote, "I charge the saints not to follow the example of the adversary in accusing the brethren. If you will not accuse me, I will not accuse you. If you will throw a cloak of charity over my sins, I will over yours. For charity covereth a multitude of sins. What many people call sin is not sin. I do many things to break down superstition, and I will break it down. Once Joseph convinced his friends that it was fine if they did polygamy too, they then had dirt on each other. So if anyone exposed him, he would expose them. Pretty simple. Once again, secret combinations are a bitch. Ballard gave the women burner phones to use and had them use Signal, a messaging app that keeps communication private, and he frequently demanded that the women erase the digital traces of his conversations with them each night. Joseph Smith told Nancy Rigdon to burn the happiness letter after reading it. The happiness letter to me is one of the most damning pieces of evidence against Joseph, and we really get a look at his brain and how he rationalized his indiscretions. Tim Ballard kept telling the women, it's for the children. Don't you want to help the children? And I can't speak to whether Tim bought his own bullshit or not. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Either way, it still stinks. Ballard also threatened the women that he was tracking them with their burner phones and company phones he provided. Additionally, he required the women he asked to go on ops as part of the couple's ruse to sign non-disclosure agreements, claiming it was required to protect the safety of the children and the participants. Ballard would then threaten to sue the women if they ever disclosed anything about his tactics, practice ops, or the couple's ruse. People wondering why these women didn't come forward earlier, there's your answer. They signed NDAs and were threatened by Ballard into silence. That's how abuse works. When you're in an abusive situation, the perpetrator makes it really hard for you to get out of it. It's not as simple as just leave. They were love bombed and told they were special and that he would literally die without them. At least 2 marriages have broken up as a result of Tim Ballard's actions with these women. Ballard offered to pay for the divorce attorney of one of his victims and had a henchman call and threaten her husband on voice message, resulting in the police being called and an investigation conducted. Joseph Smith also literally broke up marriages by marrying all of his friends' wives, including his own brothers. Maybe they didn't get divorced in the end, but he literally did not give a shit. Finally, in the spring of 2023, some of the female employees of OUR who had been on these couple ruse ops or practices came forward to OUR management. OUR had its law firm Holland and Hart conduct an external investigation, which investigation verified the victim's claims. OUR terminated Tim Ballard. OUR's board of directors, whom of most are related to Tim Ballard or are his good friends, opposed the firing and came to Ballard's aid. A joint plan was hatched between OUR and Ballard, whereby he would resign ostensibly because of the appearance of a conflict of interest with the release of Sound of Freedom, in which he has a financial interest in. Ballard would take a very lucrative severance agreement and remain the face of OUR so it could continue to raise money. As part of the plan, everyone was required to sign an NDA. We know that Ballard, quote, resigned from OUR, but we didn't know why, and it was speculated that he was actually fired. And now we know he was. At the time, I did think it was due to the backlash that Sound of Freedom got, and that they just didn't want the bad press anymore. But it turns out they had been trying to clean up the train wreck of Ballard a long time before that. With his image intact, Ballard began the Spear Fund, where he is able to continue raising money from well-intentioned people wanting to end human trafficking. OUR remained silent, using his face and the worldwide opening tour of Sound of Freedom to raise money and allowing Ballard to continue his grooming, drinking, and sexual deviancy, all on the donor's dime. Upon reasonable belief and inquiry, upon learning of the couple's ruse and how Ballard used it, the Mormon Church excommunicated Ballard. Tim Ballard nor Catherine has confirmed this excommunication, but he is no longer in the LDS database according to some people from his ward, and they don't just remove people unless you've requested your records be removed or they do it for you. So I think it's real, but it'll be interesting to see if he has a comment on that in the future. Finally, let's talk about the legitimacy of this couple's ruse. It's something Ballard came up with himself, and it wasn't just something he abused that was otherwise a really good established system in the trafficking industry. In the first plaintiff's statement, it says, Ballard explained that they were running into problems on operations when male operators did not engage in sex acts. He said that if male operators don't touch the women or children, the traffickers would figure out that it was a sting and would create danger for all. Ballard told WW how the couple's ruse came to him by revelation from God, as if there was no way he could have thought up such a brilliant ruse. I have a question. I thought the entire point of an undercover sting was to access the kidnapped children. So why are we allowing anyone to hurt these these children once they are in your line of sight. I thought once you find the kids, you grab them and arrest the bad guys. There was no further acting needed or watching children be further traumatized. The couple ruse was made up by Tim to get his rocks off, and FBI agent Greg Rogers agrees. Greg Rogers spent decades working both as an undercover agent and as the undercover coordinator for the FBI, who specialized in foreign operations and was instrumental in the United States crackdown on American citizens participating in the sex tourism trade in Southeast Asia. American Crime Journal asked Rogers in the history of the task force operating in Southeast Asia if there was any instance he could foresee bringing in 2 agents under the cover of a married couple looking to spice up their sex life. Never, not once, Rogers emphasized. It doesn't make sense as an undercover methodology. None whatsoever, he went on to say. I was the undercover coordinator in charge of operations. If someone had tried to do that, I would have said no. For one, it's not going to work, and it doesn't make any sense. Nobody's going to believe you. It's not the way it works. We are witnessing the real Tim Ballard, a manipulator and liar who will use and abuse anybody to protect himself and his own interests above all else. Rogers was then asked if he ever arrested couples in his time overseas, and he said, "We're talking about thousands of arrests, prosecutions, and extraditions back to the United States. Not one was a couple," according to Rogers, spanning 3 decades ever. Tim Ballard made it up. It's not a believable tactic, and it literally does not work. The couple's ruse has not tricked a single trafficker, and the only person it tricked was whoever his fake wife was at the time into thinking that it was actually helping children. To that end, Ballard flew women across the country where they would practice their sexual chemistry through tantric yoga, couples massages with escorts, and lap dancing on Ballard's lap. Ballard also frequented strip clubs in the Salt Lake Valley with these women to practice the couple's ruse. Ballard included his son, who had just returned from serving a mission for the Mormon Church, to the strip clubs without Ballard's wife's knowledge. At the strip clubs, Ballard would pay for and receive lap dances and ingest alcohol and pills at these practice ruses on OUR's dime with donor monies. So this part actually blew my mind. I'm not sure how Ballard convinced his returned missionary son to join him at a strip club, other than he might have been training him on how to be a future operative. But that throws a wrench in their family, because either Catherine now has to believe her son or believe her husband, or they just both profusely apologize and tell her that they repented or some bullshit. But I hope, if anything, that her son confessing to this wakes her up a little bit to see that he has lied to her at least once, and it opens the doors to all of his other lies. Ballard engaged in a ploy where he would tell women that if they were offered alcohol, which is forbidden by the Mormon Church, that she should take the drink and then open mouth kiss him and spit the alcohol into his mouth, and then he would spit it out when the traffickers were not looking. That's not, you can't keep alcohol in your mouth without people know. What? You can't drink something. You have to drink it. People are gonna know you're not drinking your drink. However, Ballard was doing the exact opposite. He was consuming excessive amounts of alcohol, tequila, of his own volition, which he drank at strip clubs, massage parlors, and on trips, to the point of passing out. For example, he missed a $250,000 speaking engagement a few weeks ago because he was drunk and missed his flight. I'm sure those people are probably happy now that he missed it due to everything going on. It's been rumored for a while now that Ballard is an alcoholic because of how red his face is progressively getting, so this lawsuit just kind of confirms those rumors. The note I want to end on is this. Ballard would ask each woman, "Is there anything you wouldn't do to save a child? Sleeping with you has nothing to do with saving children, you dumb fuck." I'm not calling the women dumb fucks, I'm calling Tim a dumb fuck. He manipulated them and played on their emotions. And you have to jump leaps and bounds to connect those two things. It would be more ridiculous if I wasn't raised Mormon and taught the principles that I previously discussed in this video. Everything Tim Ballard parroted was directly from Joseph Smith's mouth. The LDS Church can't preach from the pulpit that Joseph Smith was a righteous man and then call Tim Ballard immoral when he does the same exact things. It is hypocritical. And if you think they were both good people who just had flaws, SAing women is not a normal human flaw. It is a malicious act, not an oopsie-daisy. I am tired of the church normalizing predators and predatory behavior. Obviously, as a survivor of SA myself, this whole case hits a little close to home for me. I cannot fathom what these women went through, but I understand the shame and guilt that comes afterwards that is not theirs to feel. Tim Ballard is the culprit here. OUR and their board of directors is to blame for the alleged cover-up. These women were lied to, they were gaslit, and they are still being gaslit, as Tim denies everything and looks forward to clearing his name in court. Now, don't laugh. Let the man dream. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. And once again, I am so close to hitting the watch hours I need to get this channel monetized, like in the next video or two. And thank you for those who have sent me tips on Venmo. You guys are so nice, and my heart just melts every time. You're so thoughtful for doing that. I put a lot of time and effort into making these videos, and anything helps. Everybody say bye, Trixie Rexy. I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.